All right, so this morning, can you all see that? I have many screens. I want to make sure you can see the right one. You can see morning Mishnah, Berakhot 5.
Can you make it just a little bit bigger?
I can see people doing this with their glasses, so I thought maybe that was the case. Hold on a second. We have also, yeah, I will do that better. I think that's as big as I can make it. Okay. Okay, so Berakhot 5:1. Ein omdim lehitpalel ele mitoch koved rosh. Chasidim harishonim hayu sho'im sha'a achat umitpalelim. Kedei sheikavnu et libam lemakom afilu hamelech sho'el bishlomo lo yeshivenu. Ve'afilu nachash karoch al akevo lo yafsik. So I've actually quoted this Mishnah before to this class. It's one of my favorite. So let's just read it line by line. Ein omdim lehitpalel ele mitoch koved rosh. I highlighted those two in blue because this is what's called in Talmud a tech term. When you see the ein with the ella, it contradicts or it cancels one another out. So ein means no, right? And ella means only or rather. And when you see ein ella together, it means only. So one should only stand to say tefillah, say the Amidah, except with a reverent state of mind, with koved rosh. So that's the big statement that we're going to start with, and then we're going to talk about what that might mean. So the Chasidim Harishonim, the pious men, not Chasidim as the way that we think about them today, but this was the way that people referred to sort of the most learned of Jews at the time. The most pious of men of old used to wait an hour before praying in order that they may direct their thoughts to God. So this is perhaps, well, we'll come back to it. Even if a king, I'm sorry, that was supposed to go with the line before. That was just a text error, a formatting error. Afilu hamelech, even if a king greets him while he is praying, he should not answer. And even if a snake is wound around his heel, he should not stop. Okay, so we have a couple of things. We start obviously with this koved rosh, this idea that we're supposed to be in a reverent state of mind. How many of us come to davening at 7 a.m. in a reverent state of mind? Maybe, okay, maybe we've had our coffee, maybe we haven't, maybe we've taken an hour journey to get to where we're praying, if we can imagine, what we're talking about in these times. Maybe not, maybe we've rolled right out of bed, maybe we've already, gone for a 3-mile run by the time we get there, but it depends, right? So the idea is that we're not expecting that every single person's going to show up to pray in this reverent state of mind. And so there's a built-in system for how to do that. Now, what might that look like now? Pesukei de Zimra, right? So we have the opening service of Psalms that goes from around on a weekday, 7 to 7:30 when we were in person, now 7:30 to, 7:45. During Shabbat, closer to 45 minutes, right? We have this sort of warm up that gets us in the state of mind that we're supposed to be praying. Now, those of us who are people who get there right at the very beginning, or even if not, maybe you can imagine, does it work?
Yeah, a little.
A little, okay. Hold on a second, I'm seeing, people are in the waiting room. A little, yeah. And then ultimately what we're working up towards is maybe the Baruch Hu or the Shema, right? So we're supposed to really come in and settle ourselves and be in this sort of koved rosh, be in this like seriousness in some way, right? And it's different on the weekday than it is on Shabbat, but we're probably talking about the weekday. We're probably talking about their everyday way of prayer, their everyday sort of routine of coming into prayer. And then it says, but here in the first line, it doesn't say exactly what that means. It just says that you're supposed to be in the koved rosh. And then in the second paragraph, it says they're supposed to wait an hour before praying. So it doesn't actually say you're supposed to pray all these prayers to help you warm you up and then do the prayer. You're supposed to wait. And so it's clear, I think, that they didn't just take they didn't take the commandment to pray as a rote commandment. It wasn't just something that they woke up and did. It was something that they took quite seriously, so much so that they would set aside an additional hour. Sorry for those of you who are in the waiting room. I'm trying to see too many things at once. I can't see the participant list for some reason. They would actually come in and wait an hour. Now, I don't know, you could imagine this was like some sort of a meditation, right? It might not have been prayer. It might have just been a way to get there. Yes, Sandy.
Well, that's what Rabbi Lou based his makor, or the meditation, on. I'm sorry if you said that already.
No, I didn't say that.
But that was the basis on which we did meditation prior to.
And was there always a meditation?
Not always, but that was the rationale for the meditation, was to prepare ourselves.
Great. Right. And I know that we brought that back a little bit on some of the Friday nights where there would be some meditation prior to Kabbalat Shabbat. Right. So it's not necessarily Pesukei de Zimra, how we think about it. We're not necessarily working our way through the Siddur and the different Psalms, but rather we're sort of just showing up and being in the space. I actually think, I don't know if you've tried it. I'm sure most of you have. If you've been around a Beth Shalom long enough, you've done at least one meditation, whether you like it or not, right? And some people are more into it than others, but just to say that you can imagine that actually it can be quite helpful, especially sort of in the busy lives that we're running today, that we would show up and actually have a moment to sort of sit in the space or just be amongst the people that you're going to pray with before you actually start. And then now I think it takes even sort of a deeper meaning, if you will, because all you have to do is show up and turn on and open your computer and you're there, right? And there's got to be, that's hard. And I mean, I can tell you, I at least find it hard. I move from one activity to the next, and there's almost no sort of kavanah or like intentional break in between, especially now in the mornings, right? It's like before I would get up and then I would have a 10-minute, 8-minute walk to the synagogue at least. And now it's like, okay, do everything that you possibly can before 8 a.m. or 7:30, and then shove the, baby in the other room and then open your computer and pray. And you're like going, from one thing to another. So I think the idea of Koved Rosh, if you can take it seriously, is actually quite a nice idea in the way that we structure our prayer. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll just share a little bit of why I can't pray when I get to synagogue sometimes, is because sometimes you just feel overwhelmed with your own problems, and it's hard to even see the words on the page, or I recall times at Minyan where someone insisted on talking about Israel and everyone piled on. And it was just like, hey, this is a holy space. Could we just take a step back? I just think there's so many ways where we get in the way of ourselves when we're trying to pray. It's just how our brains are wired. And you really do need to clear a space. Sometimes I literally just feel like I have to leave the room. I just can't focus on anything.
Yeah, when you come into the first time to sort of news and say hello to people and what happened in the world the day before or anything like that. And in some ways it can feel nice and also can take away from that sort of kavanah. Iren.
I'm just going to say the opposite, although I never felt that way before. But I'm thinking that if you've chosen to pray, so it's a choice you make, it would seem to me you have to have kavanah because you have the choice to not pray.
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends on how you view the commandments, right? Whether you view the commandments as something that you choose or whether you view the commandments as something that is a commandment, like something that you have to do. So there are people, I would say less so in our community and more in Orthodox communities, that feel that feel that they are commanded 3 times to show up, whether they are, feeling it or not, right? Whether they have this to do or that to do or not. And so there are people that feel obligated in that way, obligated to God or obligated to commandments or obligated to Torah, that's the case. And it's not just like, oh, how am I feeling this morning? Hi, do you want to say a quick hi? Sorry, everyone.
Hi,
Bye bye.
Reva. Bye-bye. Have a good day at school.
Later. Bye.
Bye-bye, Reva.
Sure.
Oh.
So that's right. So that's exactly right. So there is an element. I think that we probably feel an element of choice. But I think what they're talking about here is like, okay, we have this thing that we have to do at 7 a.m. How can we prepare ourselves so that we're in COVID Rosh, so that we're in the best state of mind that we can be in when we get to that time? Anyone else? All right, so I want to jump to the final line. I'm having trouble seeing the the waiting room and the text at the same time for some reason this morning. So that's why I keep jumping in between. Okay, so the final line of the text, which is my favorite, Afilu hamelech shoel bishlomo, even if a king greets him while praying, and even if a snake, ve'afilu nachash, karoch el akevo lo yafsik, and even if a snake is wound around his heel, he should not stop. Now, I want to just clear it up before somebody else says it, because I'm sure it's what you're thinking. We know already in the Talmud and in the Torah, pikuach nefesh. We know already that you're not ever supposed to put your life in danger for any reason, right? For prayer. And so there's discrepancy about why they chose the snake, because with a snake, you might not know if it's a venomous snake or not a venomous snake. If you look down and saw a snake around your leg, your instinct would be that you were in danger, right? But what the Talmud sort of teaches us is that that might not actually be the case. It might not be a venomous snake. And so you have to evaluate that. So that's also kind of a funny concept, right? That you would look down, see a snake, and then say to oneself, oh, does that look like it's venomous, or does it not look like it's venomous? And should I like jump out of the way and try to figure this out? And the same with a king, right? So you might feel that you're, depending on who the leader is, right? King is sort of a substitute for the word leader. In some instances, you might see a leader and feel that your life was in danger. And if that was the case, then of course, pikuach nefesh, of course, you're supposed to look up and greet the king or greet the leader if you felt like for some reason it would endanger your life not to do so. Now, that being said, I want to sort of push you a little bit this morning, and that's to remind you about the idea of pshat and drash. So we have pshat, we have this idea, the exact meaning of the text that says you should, well, I'm not going to say it. We have the exact meaning of the text, and then we have the drash or the kavanah, or like the intention of what it's supposed to mean. So does anybody want to take a stab at what the pshat of the text is, what the exact meaning of the text is, versus what the drash might be saying, versus what we're supposed to take from it?
We can't see the text anymore.
Okay, I'll bring it back. Okay, so now that you have it in front of you, does anybody want to take a stab at what is the exact meaning? Like what can we take from literally reading this line about the end with this king and the snake versus what it's sort of intended to teach us in the bigger concept of the whole Mishnah? Don't all dive in at once. Iren.
Do they mean to say even in a very serious situation, don't interrupt, but they don't actually mean snake or king?
Okay, so what's the pshat? What's the exact meaning? What is it actually telling us to do?
Continue.
Right, no matter what. Pshat, exact meaning of the text, no matter what is happening around you, earthquake, snake, leader, no matter what is happening around you, we don't break from our prayer from the Amidah. We don't move our feet, right? We've stepped 3 steps forward, 3 steps backwards. We're in this spot. No matter what's happening around you, we don't break our prayer. And then the intention, the kavanah, you're saying is what?
Even if it looks serious around, it's not as serious as the Amidah is serious.
Okay, so even if it looks like a venomous snake, don't worry, the Amidah is more important. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, Todd.
It talks about if the king inquires, and talks about the snake is coiled. How did the snake get coiled? One was concentrated so much that one had not noticed that the snake is already coiled around one's foot. One had concentrated so much that one had not noticed that the king had entered. It was only when the king spoke and inquired that one noticed. So one's already in this state of concentration to start with.
Mm-hmm. So you're arguing that we're already there. In order for you to end up in a situation that there's a snake wrapped completely around both of your feet that you can't move, you've already been in a Koved Rosh, and you've already been so immersed in your prayer that you're now noticing. And so what does that mean for us? Does that mean that we can break it, or that we can't break it, or that we probably wouldn't break it? Don't know. That's okay. All right, Ellen.
I'm thinking that it means that our connection with God needs to be higher than what's going on with our day-to-day life. And that this takes it to an extreme, but that's the message.
Great. So Pshat, ignore the outside world, do everything that you can to be sort of focused no matter what happens. And the drash of that, the intention of that is we should do everything that we can to be focused on our Amidah and to be focused on our prayer. Though, of course, danger is maybe where we draw the line, right? In Pikuach Nefesh. Anyone else? Any other interpretations? Okay, so I think that we've pretty much gotten it, right? We've figured out what it means to be Koved Rosh, and then we've evaluated a little bit how we might be able to get to Koved Rosh. So perhaps if we view it the way that Todd was saying, we have this declaration of, okay, you have to be Koved Rosh, and then the most pious of prayers would have gotten there an hour before. Maybe we get there 5-10 minutes before to get us in our state of mind, depending on if we view the hour as Pesukei de Zimra or not. It's not necessarily clear that it's prayer that we're coming in for. And then if we can do those things, we get ourselves in this mindset that even if a snake was coiled around our leg, we might not even notice the snake because we're so immersed in our prayer. And of course, the caveat, we remember that if we look down and there is a snake coiled around our leg, likely we shouldn't take the time to evaluate whether or not it's going to kill us or not. We should probably get out of there and do everything that we can to keep ourselves safe. Okay, so that's sort of the big idea that we're starting with in chapter 5. Any other thoughts? Todd, did you have your hand?
Well, I recall a story. The irony is I can't remember whether it was told about the Baal Shem Tov or the Vilna Gaon, but basically his son was davening and there was a baby crying in the next room, and his son kept davening, and he said, "What are you, a fool? Don't you hear the baby crying? Go attend to the baby." So I just, note that. Yeah,
definitely. So this is why it's my favorite. It makes me laugh because for 6 months prior to when we are no longer in the shul, I used to bring Riva to Minyan once a week, and we have in the chapel those 4 doors, right? And I mostly trusted that if she went out of one that she would come back in the other, but it wasn't always clear. And during the Amidah, I would kind of wait 30 seconds and then I would say, it's too quiet. Like she's playing with the microphones behind the scene, right? So like I really do think that there's that's the drash, right? That there are things that are going to come up in your life and you shouldn't just let the baby run out of the shul. You should probably go and check to make sure that everything's okay. So that's why it kind of makes me laugh. I think it's super relevant and there's always something else going on in the room, right? Somebody's getting up to go to the bathroom, somebody's talking to their neighbor or whatever. So there is this idea that we should try to be as focused as possible, and the reality that life is still happening around us, even when we're in a sacred space like the sanctuary or the chapel. So I think it's a really nice way to set this up. Okay. I am gonna share again. So these next 2 are a bit technical. I feel like I say that a lot. That's just how the Mishnah is, I suppose. Brachot 5, number 2. So, Mazkirim givurot geshamim bitchiyat hametim. Vishoalim geshamim bevirkat hashanim. V'havdalah bechonen hada'at. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Omra beracha revi'it bifnei atzma. And Rabbi Eliezer Omer behoda'ah. Okay, so this section is about additions in our Amidah. We have sort of the framework for the Amidah, which are the 18 brachot, in our case now 19 brachot. And this next section is about certain pieces that we add to it. Not about additions in the festivals and such, but sort of outside of the framework of the 18 brachot. We talked about blessings, petitions, and thanksgiving. That middle section of petitions comes out on Shabbat. But we're talking about if we're thinking about a full Amidah. So they mention the Amidah, they mention God's power to bring rain in the blessing for the resurrection of the dead. What actually it says here is the word mazkirin, and it says here to mention, but that's important. So it's not an ask, it's not a petition, it's just a mention of the prayer. So I want to jump over to here. Can you see that when I switch the view? Okay, so I'm going to go up to our Amidah. And here's the very beginning, right? Here's the Avot, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Sarah, Rivcha, Rechav, Leah. Then we have this prayer, right? This line right here, Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hagashem. That God is a bringer of rain, right? And so sometimes this line is interpreted as if we're actually asking for rain, but right now we're in the section of blessing and we're not actually asking for anything, right? It just says, Mashiv HaRuach Umarid HaGashem, one who causes the wind to blow and the rain to come down. So that's one. And then it says in the text, B'tchiat HaMetim. And then the very last line here, Mechaye Baruch Ata Adonai Mechaye HaMetim, the one who causes the dead to rise, right? The bringing back the dead. So the question is, that very first line of the Mishnah, why would we pair this like Tichiat HaMetim, the one who causes rain to fall, and Tichiat HaMetim, the one who causes the rising of the dead, and Morid HaGeshem, the one who causes rain to fall. Why might that be like in the same Mishnah? There's no right answer here. This is just like a drash, an interpretation. Why might we be pairing the idea of rain and rising of the dead? Ellen?
Well, rain is what causes crops to grow or life to come out of the ground. And the parallel of the giving life to the dead is the same idea.
Great. So there's an idea that rain is life, right? Rain causes our crops to grow. Rain gives us the sustenance that we need to be able to live and to eat and to sustain ourselves. And similarly, we might say that this sort of Tichiat HaMetim is a similar message. Interestingly, in the Reformed communities, that piece of that language is actually taken out. This idea that we rise dead is taken out, and it's substituted for something like God who gives breath to all humans or something like that. So it's a question of what that actually means, but yes, life, sustenance, that kind of thing. Sandy?
Well, it's part of, we don't know how that all happens. I mean, scientifically, but clearly when the liturgy was written, it was all a mystery and came from a creator.
Great. And I'll take it one step forward to say and to remind you that this part is specifically not a petition. So it's like we don't know what's going to happen. And also we're not in this section of the Amidah, we're not actually asking for it, right? We're just sort of saying this is a possibility of God's power and like bless you, God, for being able to do that. Yeah, Sandy Goldstein.
Do we know when this Mishnah was written? I always thought of resurrection as a Christian contaminant to the Judaism.
I mean, the Mishnah was mostly compiled at the same time. I don't know specifically about this one, but you're right. I mean, we'll see in the next Mishnah about different sort of beliefs and Christian, like Christian belief. But I'm not sure that. I mean, it's all written around the same time. So,
But how are you taught as a rabbi about Michaye Meitim in terms of how authentically Jewish it is, or how much it was a concept influenced by the peoples among whom we lived?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there is definitely influence, and there is this idea of acknowledging God's power. Now, I had a Rabbi Dorf, who used to joke about Michaye HaMeitim, because he always used to say, if I died when I was 75, I wouldn't want to be resurrected as a 75-year-old. I want to be resurrected as a 16-year-old, right? So like there's this idea of sort of what do you actually come back as? And when we studied that with him, he was pretty adamant that this is not. We studied it in the context actually of cremation, and that there's this myth that that there's a belief that the reason that Jews don't cremate is because of Michaye HaMeitim, that if we were to cremate, that we wouldn't be able to rise. And he sort of said that's like the least Jewish idea that you could ever imagine, because if God was so powerful to be able to rise you back, God would be able to put your body back together and do so. Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a little bit of both. So thanks for asking, Dara.
This always reminds me, I think it was the prophet Jeremiah with the, maybe it wasn't Jeremiah, but the saying that, in the Messianic age, all the bones will roll together and the people will rise up. Where's that from? And in the sequence of events does it come?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it is definitely the idea that bodies are going to come back, and it's kind of a scary thought. And also like one that I don't think that we necessarily think about as being literal. I don't know. It's hard to say. I think different people have different, associations with it or ways of being able to understand it. Iren.
I was thinking though that the idea of rebirth is almost implicated in death, because without connecting it to Christianity or other religions, because the person who died actually gave its life to Le Dor Vador, so the next generation, and so it lives on anyways. So it's almost implicated to me.
Yeah, in some ways it's not necessarily about the body, right? I mean, it says the rising of the dead, and we know that what that implication is sort of this messianic time when the bodies will rise. But what that actually means, similar to what Sandy said before, we don't really know what that means. We've not yet achieved that, if that even is the goal, right? I guess is sort of Sandy.
Well, I was just thinking of all the people who are buried on the Mount of Olives because they believe they'll be the first to be resurrected when the Mashiach comes.
Right.
So there's this whole tradition. And I don't know, again, to Sandy's question about, did that start after Christ?
At the Mount of Olives?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not sure about that. I mean, now is I believe that's where many soldiers are buried now, I think, right? I think is that this spot. I'm not 100% sure about that.
There's not a lot of room left, apparently.
Probably not. Yeah, Ernie.
Well, I think a 21st century interpretation of the rising is that our DNA is passed on, and we live through our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. I think that's the way we in the 21st century would interpret those. that.
Right. Yeah, so sort of like what Irene was saying, Lador Vador, this idea that we're sort of passing from generation to generation. And it's probably for that reason that a part of it anyway, that the Reformed communities have taken that language out, because there isn't this idea of messianic times. Rather, we've sort of they've said that's not something that they're praying for on a daily basis. Similar to like the fact that they took Musaf, that Reformed congregations often take Musaf out because sacrifice isn't necessarily so relevant anymore. But there's definitely, I mean, we know that there's more than just this. I mean, throughout the entire Amidah, there's language of messianic redemption. And this is just, again, this is just a blessing of it. This is just sort of saying we're about to, run through all of these brachot in the Amidah, all these petitions, and we're going to set ourselves up by just saying, God, who is able to make the dead rise, sort of an exclamation of power in some sort of a way. I want to move on to the next section. I lost you. Hold on a second. Okay. Okay. Then it says V'shoalim hageshamim b'virkat hashanim. So in that first section, Mashiv haruach umorid hagashem, we acknowledge that God is able. God has the power to bring the rains. And then shoalim hageshamim birkat hashanim. Then we actually ask for rain a little bit later. So here's the translation of the Amidah, and then we get to the different sections. Here's the first one, Atachonim ladam da'at, about wisdom, and return us, hashivenu, shlach lanu, when you beat your chest in the middle of the Amidah and repent. And I'm gonna get all the way down to, sorry, the Siddur is sort of broken up funny. Okay. Barech Aleinu Adonai Eloheinu et hashana hazot. You can see here that there's two sections, that from December 4th to Pesach, you say one piece of it. And then for the rest of the year, you say the other. Al Panei Ha'adamah. So Adonai, make this a blessed year. May its varied produce bring us happiness. And then from Pesach to December, you say grant blessing. And from December to Pesach, you say grant dew and rain for blessing upon the earth. Satisfy us with abundance. Bless us our year for the best of years. Praise are you, Adonai, who blesses the year. Mevarech hashanim. But this is specifically that section for rain, asking for a good year, a bountiful host. We should note that these two insertions, the Morid Hageshem, and this insertion here, where we say V'tein bracha, right? We only insert those in during the winter, which is typically the rainy season in Israel. Generally, the idea is that it doesn't rain so much in the summer, and we don't ask for God to do something that's unusual, right? We would ask God to do something that sort of aligns with the seasons. So that's the second part, and then we have this question of Havdalah, which is really interesting, I think. The Havdalah bechonen hada'at. Oh yeah, Sandy, you're muted.
Get away from the rain.
Yeah.
I'm studying in the Talmud circle. We're studying Tanit, and we just went through these Honi stories where you don't pray for rain, you pray for mercy, and you pray. I mean, it's all about not directly asking for rain, but here it is. So I don't know.
Just showing the distinction. Yeah. So here in the Amidah, that's an interesting, it's interesting. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I find more appealing the fact that if a humble, righteous person prays for mercy, that would bring the rain, rather than directly asking for rain, because I mean, yes, it's the rainy season. We all know about rainy seasons in California. And so it's somehow more satisfying to do it that way than to pray for rain and then the rain doesn't come.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting observation. I mean, in this bracha, in this specific blessing, we only add the rain piece during the time when we need rain. So that's part of it. But it also says, satisfy us with abundance and bless our year as the best of years, right? If we're reading it in English, that's the translation. Praise are you, God, who blesses the years. So there is that one line about granting dew and blessing, but in some ways it's like not even the focal point of the bracha. So it's like, okay, here are all the ways we want to be abundant. We want to have enough to sustain us. And during the non-rainy season, that might mean that you bring rain. But during the rest of the year, we want to know that we're able to be sustained in some way. So yeah, the blessing doesn't say, blessed are you, God, who causes the rain to fall or something like that. It's a bit more vague. And so probably more aligns with what you're talking about, which is a great connection. Marcia.
Well, you know, with what Sandy said, and this whole idea, we're not asking for rain. Because what do you do with the thought if it doesn't rain and you have a terrible drought? Does that mean you didn't pray hard enough? Does that mean that God's not powerful enough to give you rain? Whereas if you acknowledge blessing, and just saying, I'm grateful for what I'm getting, that puts your relationship with God a very different place.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm sure those of you who have been around long enough in shul, whether that's here or elsewhere, you've definitely had those times of year where you say that blessing for the first or second time and it's a downpour outside, and you think to yourself, man, that really worked, right? Like I'm really in the right. But really, it's about sort of this how this mission is explained. Like it's about what's already happening and sort of blessing the fact that the seasons are working the way that they're supposed to, in a way. I think to me, it's an easier framing to sort of like to get behind, as opposed to the moment I say Umarid Hageshem, the rain start to fall outside of my window. Yeah, Iran.
I actually like the idea of, I'm a little controversial today, but I like the idea of praying to nature personally. And in addition, praying doesn't assure the results.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I guess
we should be able to accept and it doesn't mean we didn't pray enough. I mean, how many times do you wish for something, but do you always get it? And does it mean you didn't wish enough?
Yeah, and I think we also have to remember, how the times are different. So people who were farmers or who depended on crops for their livelihood in a way that we don't today, it can be quite devastating if there's not enough rain to have those crops, and then what that actually means for their lifestyle, for their livelihood. And then what Marcia was asking, do those people then think that they didn't pray hard enough? Like, what's the sort of theological question behind a bad year of rain, right? Is that it's kind of like the liturgy that we talked about in the high holidays, utfila utstaka, right? Like if we can do those things, we sort of mitigate the decree, and that's a hard theology to kind of get your head around. Dara.
It seems to me that rain is almost always a proxy for blessing, and withholding the rain is a proxy for punishment. And there are some places, of course, where this is stated very explicitly. If you follow my, commandments, then I will grant the rain and your land will be fruitful. But if you don't, then I will, et cetera, et cetera. So, as modern urban people, we have to sort of interpret that in a different way. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the actual language that you're talking about, there is a lot of, if you obey my commandments, I will give you sustenance. It doesn't often say I'll cause the rains to fall. So the rain is kind of like it's not a given, but it's kind of like what Sandy was saying. We're not necessarily praying for the actual rain to fall, but we're sort of praying that God views us as as being deserving of crops. And how do we get those crops? Well, of course, the rain has to fall in order to make them grow. So again, sort of depending on, you know, how you view it, but I think the rain is a necessity to the thing maybe that you're praying for, I guess, if that makes sense. Okay, I want to get into Havdalah. Anybody else? I just want to get into Havdalah. All right, this is a little complicated. Let's see if we can get through it. So Havdalah. So we have 3 opinions on when we actually are supposed to say Havdalah. Okay, so the first one, Bechonen Hada'at, that we know, I'm going to show you in a second, is where our halacha falls. So here we have, I'm going to bring us back, sorry. In the Amidah that is at the conclusion of Shabbat, you can see here, at the conclusion of Shabbat, or a Yom Tov, substitute the paragraph in the smaller print. So we're going to look at this paragraph here, and it says, Chonen, Ata chonen la'adam da'at, Ata chonen tana la'adam, I'm going to get you to the Havdalah part, V'tavdel Adonai Eloheinu ben kodesh l'chol. So the question is, when do we say Havdalah? We say it here. This is in the section of the Ma'ariv. We're not necessarily saying it on Havdalah the way that we think about Havdalah. The first opinion, which is the Tanakama, which is the voice of the Mishnah tells us that we say Havdalah in Aravit. Then Rabbi Akiva teaches us, let's go back. Rabbi Akiva says, Omra beracha revi'it bifnei atzma. They are actually supposed to say the Havdalah blessing as the 4th blessing of the Amidah. So he's suggesting, Rabbi Akiva is suggesting, that there's an independent blessing that is Havdalah all by itself that comes right before that section. So on a Saturday night, like in the same place that we were just talking about, that comes actually right before the 4th bracha, or acts as a 4th. And then Rabbi Eliezer says it's recited as part of the Thanksgiving blessing. So actually you're supposed to go all the way down, and that Havdalah is put in, let's see if this loads up. Havdalah is inserted all the way down here at Modim, because Havdalah is not actually a petition. Havdalah is not actually something that we're asking for. It shouldn't be in that middle section of the Amidah. Actually, it's an expression of gratitude, and so it should be placed where we express gratitude. Now, the question is, why do we care so much, right? Maybe that's what you're wondering. And it's just kind of one of those things that the Mishnah is helping us to set up what our prayer looks like right now, right? There's different ways of being able to add. The one that I find sort of the most interesting, though, of those 3 is Rabbi Akiva's, who's suggesting actually to add an additional prayer that doesn't exist in our Amidah. And all of the commentators say, like, you can't do that. There are 18 brachot. Now we know there are 19. There are 18 brachot, and it's called the Shemona Esrei, and we can't add a blessing. So forget about that idea. And then I don't know, maybe like, you know, thoughts about Rabbi Eliezer, maybe that sort of makes sense. This idea that that Havdalah is not something that we're petitioning for in the same way of other things, but actually that it should be in the Thanksgiving prayer. And then ultimately where we know we ended up, because we can see the Siddur, where we know we ended up was that it's back up in the section of finishing of the very first section of the Amidah. Yeah, Betsy.
So I missed the very beginning and I missed last week. So maybe part of this answer is in last week, but what's the 19th blessing, or what was the additional one, and when did that happen?
Oh, that's a great
If
question.
it's okay to...
So it's actually, there's discrepancy about which one it is. It's not the last one. It's somewhere in the middle. And it happened obviously it happened after the Mishnah, obviously. And yeah, so there's like discrepancy on actually which one it is. I think there's a discrepancy between 2 or 3 of them. I'd have to look it up exactly. It's interesting, right? Because all the texts that we study now are like, are talking about the 18 brachot, and the way that they're broken up is 3, 13, 3. Does that make sense? Yeah. but actually it's somewhere in the middle of those petitions that was added, not one of the beginnings or one of the ends. Why,
just because I feel like I should know it. And I felt like, I've never asked the question. And it's like, yeah, why is it the Shemona Esrei? But then you remind us it's 19 blessings, not 18.
Yeah.
And it's just like one of those things that I don't think about or I take for granted or I'm afraid to ask a stupid question.
No, it's not a stupid question at all. And it's almost like we sort of almost ignore it at this point because all of our Sidurim have 19 brachot in them. Maybe if you had a copy of like the very first Siddur, it might not have it in there, but even there, I think that I'm pretty sure that it's somewhere in the middle, that we're not exactly sure which one, because there's just been different iterations. Yeah, Iren.
Does Havdalah have a meaning, the word Havdalah?
Yeah, Havdal means to separate, or to, so in our case, it means to separate the holy from the normal, right? The Shabbat from the rest of the week. And yeah, there's so that's exactly the point, right? So what, where in the Amidah is it supposed to be? And we're used to saying Havdalah completely separately from the Aravi, from the Mariv service, from the Amidah completely. And here there's a question of, are we supposed to incorporate it into the Amidah, or is it something that's supposed to be taken out and set on its own? Sandy, did you have something? You're muted. It's okay.
I was going to ask a similar question to Iren about, because we do it separately. And so this was a little confusing about figuring out where it is.
Right, we're not used to seeing it. Right, the place that we're used to seeing it is where the voice of the Mishnah, the Tanakama, is exactly suggesting where it is. There's this language in the Amidah at the very end of a festival or a Shabbat that essentially reminds us that we're separating we're now doing the final Aravit, the final Mariv at the end of the Shabbat, and we're separating from Shabbat into the regular week, and then we also do now this custom of Havdalah over the wine, specifically, like over, it's a separate blessing. But it's just to say, to bring us back to the very first question of this Mishnah, is that we're dealing with 3 additions made to the Amidah that aren't in our weekday, essentially, or that aren't in our regular Amidah. And the 3 additions that we're making are, the 3 additions to the 19 blessings, to the 18 or 19 blessings, depending on how you view it. And those 3 additions are Umarid Hagashem, and then this prayer for rain, and which is sort of fit in, depending on the season, and Havdalah. That's the point of this Mishnah, is to say, here's our structure of the Amidah, and then there's 3 additions that we also add, and we want to understand them and why we add them and where they came from. Yeah, Betsy.
Is the point,
Yeah, you're good.
Is the point of the Havdalah, like, that we are talking about, that we're more familiar with, because most of us probably are not at Mariv services after Shabbat or at the end of a slew of days of holiday. And so it's a statement in there, but I'm pretty sure they don't use wine in shul. But it's like, when I've been at Richmond Torah Center to end the holiday, it's said in the Mariv prayer, then you go upstairs and you do, quote, regular Havdalah. And I was wondering if it's just sort of the home ceremony for the not going to shul people. Why?
Maybe, though, actually you can do the Havdalah that you're thinking about, the candle, wine, spices. You actually have up until Tuesday to be able to do that ritual. So like, in a lot of schools, they do Havdalah on Monday mornings to celebrate with the children. And so I don't know that it's necessarily home versus shul, but it's like keva versus kavanah in a way. It's like the keva is the mention of Havdalah in the Amidah, and then the kavanah is this kind of ritual around Havdalah that actually marks it in a way that we can taste, see, and smell. It's sort of different than just a prayer, I guess it would be the answer to that. And Havdalah, in terms of the ritual that we're all familiar with, it's not it's not halacha. Like you have time. It's not time bound, right? In the sense that you have to do it right at the end of Havdalah. So Shabbat ends no matter what. Shabbat ends whether you say those brachot in Havdalah that we're familiar with or not. Iren.
My question is, I'm curious. The word Aravit means Amidah also?
Aravit means is the Hebrew word is evening, like Erev.
Oh, and so why does it also mean Arab? No, Aravit is not the language of Arab language.
With an ayin.
Yeah, it's a different.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Sure, Dara.
I just wanted to know, when did the quote unquote usual ritual of Havdalah start in relation to
I don't know exactly. I'm not sure exactly when that started. It's definitely not. I mean, it's in our Mishnah, but it's not ritualized in that way in the Mishnah. So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly when it started, but I'll happily look it up and let you know. I'm not sure. Sandra. Oh, you're muted. I have a feeling you're going to have trouble with sound, but I'm just... The problem is it's very squeak. You're having that problem when sometimes it squeaks, so it's hard to, maybe you can type. I can't understand. The sound is really more I can understand. I'm sorry. That's okay. Sorry, Sandra. Anybody else? All right. I think we won't go into the next one. The next one's quite long, and this one we spent a lot of time sort of going through it. So thank you for your questions. Thanks for being here this morning. That was number 1 and number 2. So next week we'll dive into number 3. The next one is about the Shliach Tzibor and how we treat our prayer leaders.